get started, so take a seat. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming. This is the three of us who put this on. As some of you know, the second Wednesday of every month we do this. I'm a mortgage broker. Anthony and Santosh are both realtors from a professional standpoint. But before any of us were in this industry, we all owned rental properties. So between us, I think we own, I don't know, we probably have 40 plus doors, probably closer to 50 doors. Between us, we even have some joint ventures among us. So we've been around, made a lot of mistakes that we like to help you guys avoid. Tonight, we have a special treat for you. Before I go on forever, I will just hand this to Laura and let her take over from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Lane. That was great. All right. So I'll be Laura. I don't know how well I can follow all of that on what magical things I can do, but ultimately, I'm a landlord. So I've been involved in real estate investing. I started super early, so we won't age me or anything. I crashed and burned, so I went through a whole process in my early 20s, thought I was brilliant, rented to all my friends, failed miserably, and did a restart here. So thankfully, I've learned from my mistakes, and I'm here to hopefully help others in the room who are interested. So currently right now we're at just over 80 units, I think about 88. And that's a mix from essentially everything. I got really mad when they coined the BRRRR phrase, because I was like, man, if it was going to be that silly, I would have named it, because that's truly, truly how we started out. My husband and I, we were working. I was in not-for-profit. He was doing delivery work. We were spending our weekends and our evenings, our holidays, scrubbing and painting and all the things that I am definitely not good at. So you don't have to worry about that now. I will not do any maintenance on your properties. My husband still is very good at that, thank goodness. But we started that from the bootstrapping, joint venture, then multifamily partnerships. So we've been involved in what I like to say is a variety. So I hope what that means is that I can provide you guys with some good information. So yeah, just a little bit about me. We had a fun day today as well. My husband may or may not arrive. I may or may not get home tonight. So we've lost the fob to get into the vehicle. So I am good. We talk about these great automated systems. I love what I can do in computers and adjust things, but for whatever reason, without the fob, you apparently can't get into the car. So all my great swag is in the car. If we're lucky, it might show up. If not, there'll be lots of ways to find me, and we'll find other ways. So let's just kind of get into it and see what we've got. So what I'm going to run through, and I hope there's going to be lots of time because I want to hear from you guys, right? I'm going to go through some top do's and don'ts. We're going to talk about some landlord and tenant archetypes, and we're going to talk about managing your properties. So, with getting into that, I wanted to really kind of touch on the current market. So let me know who you guys are. So in here, how many right now are current landlords? How many own properties? Okay, good. And over 5 doors, keep your hands up. 10, 20, okay. And then property managers. How many property managers do I have in the room right now? Okay. All right, you're on your own. I don't know what to do for you. You're by yourself. So a lot of what I do, I work with great property managers. Our process really, I think for all of us, is to be good landlords. So a lot of what I'm going to show today is going to be around that. How do we be great landlords? How do we move away from that bad landlord reputation, right? So with that, I kind of want to just touch in where we are. So what do people think about the current market in Calgary for finding tenants? We've got a good group. I think a bit better than 50% of you are landlords now. So how are you, what market do you think we're in now?
Balanced.
Everyone's trying.
There's still a high occupancy rate from last year, even though the rents have come down a little bit.
Yep. So we could be moving through, right? Definitely. I don't think we're in the landlord's market in the same aspect where we were like literally it was almost harder, and maybe I'll be the only one that'll say that. I don't know, maybe our property manager in the room may or may not agree with me, But sometimes in the landlord's market, it's harder to find the great tenants because you're getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of inquiries. And you've got to weed through all of that. It's like when you're trying to hire somebody and you're trying to get through 500 resumes to find that one great person. So I sometimes find the landlord's market more difficult than what may or may not be rolling into a bit of a tenant's market. It's also the edge of winter. We're going to see our spring uptick come. So I do kind of agree with the balanced market right now. Things are kind of steady and fair to both. We're seeing rents coming down a little bit, but it's just kind of having a baseline on where we are today. What do we think we might need to change based on what type of market we're in? And that was kind of part of the things I wanted to talk about is rental incentives. Because I think there's a lot of opinions around these things, and we see a lot of rental incentives flying out. I started my career, I'm not going to swear, but I started my career here in Calgary with Boardwalk. So, it was very, very different piece. And what I often say is for us small landlords out there, we can't compete with some of those rental incentives, right? So starting to drop security deposits to $0 or $500, what does that do to the small landlord? And so when we're trying to compete with the big companies on that, what do we have to offer instead? So I have oodles of information on why I look at different things. Same with the rent reductions. I've always been a stickler around rent reductions. I know once, it's oftentimes you're like, okay, well, the month is already pretty much gone, so I'm just going to offer the half month free. And I know lots of people do that. I find if I start a tenancy already negotiating on the money, then I'm going to possibly have a tenant who maybe thinks that I'm not very serious about the rent payments, and maybe they're going to think that rent's negotiable. Now, again, that's not hard and true. It's just a consideration when you're thinking about these types of incentives that you might put in. I love value adds and gifts. I want to know, I just love them anyways. I want to know what my tenants want. I want to get to know my tenants. We're YYC pet friendly. So if you're looking at anything, that's my Facebook group. We've got, I think, 28,000 in there right now and continuing to grow. So obviously I'm a geek about pets. So all somebody has to do is show me a puppy and, we're in. I'll still check credit. But, so what do they really want? So when we're looking at things, what can I do that's going to make a difference? Is it really reducing a piece of a half month's rent, or am I showing the value that's making the difference why this person really wants to live in this home, right? And so that's a whole piece that is something else you can look into. I'll share later with some of my digital courses. I do a whole segment. I'm going to try to cover a bunch of stuff for you guys today and not bore you, but I do a whole thing around your ideal tenant profile. So when we know really well who we want and who wants to live in the property, it's really easy to give them some great gifts. And I mean, that's one of my favorite things, is going around on holidays. So I won't buzz on this too much, but you see it happening. I've already seen a bunch of them out there, ads with, free this month's rent and cut the deposit down to this. And I just, for all of us in the room here with under 1,000 units, in my opinion, we need to be careful, right? Okay, so do's and don'ts in the market. So we're gonna run through some really super basic stuff that I know you guys are all pros on. I'm sure, hopefully, maybe I'm the only one in the room that made these mistakes some of the times. So new legislation, how often are we reading our Tenancies Act? When was the last time they printed it? Do they actually really ever update it? It's very, very dry. So staying in contact with that. I've always been a member of the Calgary Residential Rental Association here. Excellent, excellent resource. They're a nonprofit organization. Great to support them. I always often say, I'm not smart enough to make this stuff up. Let's work and collaborate. And that's why I love seeing all you guys out here, spending your evening, because that's what we're really ultimately doing is educating ourselves and supporting each other, right? So your basic, you're going to keep screening your tenants. We're not going to just be like, okay, it's a tough market. I'm only getting 10 people. I'm going to just let them in. We want to make sure we get the right tenants in, maintaining. I'm going to talk a little bit about communication later on. Okay, so what shouldn't we do? So how many people have seen these ads where they're completely untrue? The pictures don't match the property. No wonder tenants don't believe us. And we're like, this is why we're frustrated, but yet, and that's my whole thing, is about how do we become the good landlord, right? How do we make sure that we're changing that reputation that landlords have, and maybe at some point it's gonna be like the landlords are the good guys. How about that? I'm in. So let's not embellish or exaggerate. I'm honest. I don't lie about location. I've worked in forest lawns. If there's such a thing, I'm a forest lawn expert. You can ask me about it later. And ultimately, I know the good streets and the bad streets. I know what's going on. I'm actually super proud to be able to say that I feel like I'm actually changing the community with every new tenant that I place. That's great. I had a fantastic colleague and friend of mine the other day say, well, what if you have a, more difficult or not so great property, then you're not going to get such a great tenant. And I said, well, that's the opposite. The more of a difficult property that I have, the better the tenant I need, especially if location, right? So if I've already got a difficult property and location and then I put a not so great tenant in, now I'm making a mess. So really looking at those features, I spend lots of time talking to people about location. Ignoring maintenance requests, not super helpful. And we'll talk about tenant archetypes because in this one, I'm sure nobody would ever ignore a maintenance request. But sometimes you could get that needy tenant who's constantly messaging about, so I have one, they're probably still upset with me. And it was just before Christmas and the coat hook fell off the wall. And it's like not the closet door, not anything that comes with the property, just like somebody hung a hook on the wall at some point. Other people moved out, other people moved in. It wasn't really ours. It was probably never hung properly by a proper maintenance person, and it's fallen off the wall. And I said that that's really not something we maintain. Like that's like not, we don't consider that to be part of the property. It's kind of like similar to you hanging your picture on the wall. And so they're quite upset with me. So it's, how do we manage what those expectations are for us and for our tenants, right? So talking about those communication things. So this is what I do for fun. We figure out problems, we try to solve them, we try to keep people happy, we try to keep long-term tenants. So just different ideas on maybe I could have structured that conversation a little bit differently, right? To make sure that we're supporting everybody. Obviously, nobody in here would ever enter a unit without notice. What are we, $10,000 fine? Is it $10,000 or $25,000 fine? Who's got that for me? Come on, guys, who's got the fine? I thought we knew all our rules before we got started here. Okay, so I'll get somebody to fact check that. If it's 10, I think it's 10,000. That's expensive for me to just walk in to a property. I don't think it's worth it. Keeping security deposits unfairly. I did mention earlier, so I don't want to get in trouble on where I used to work, but there are certain things that sometimes are kind of notorious for some of these companies or even small landlords who have spent that money and decided that money is theirs. So obviously we need to know our rules. So, these are all things, basic, boring rules around tenancy stuff, right? Obviously we're not going to discriminate. We're not going to harass, pressure move outs. You hear all about our rent evictions or how we're going to push somebody out of a property to sell it. So we don't want to do anything. These are all the things that gives us as landlords a bad name, right? There are ways to do things, I think, respectfully, ethically, with empathy. I mean, that's essentially how I run my business, is as a human first. So regardless of anything else, there's no landlord and tenant, we're people, right? And we all need to have a place to live. And I like it to be well maintained and taken care of. I like bills to be paid. I'm pretty simple, right? It's easy stuff. Anything shocking on here where you're like this is pretty standard stuff, right? This is probably common sense for all of you guys in here. So let's have some more fun. We'll run into some tenant archetype stuff. I'm actually going to do the landlords first. So there's no right or wrong answer on this. I've been all of these landlords. So it's not like, one is the better landlord versus the other landlord. I know we all want to be the strategic landlord, but are we really? And what really is the investor? And are we really? Accidental. So that's probably one of my most favorite, right? We own a property. We don't want to live in that property anymore because we're, trading up to something larger. We're going to rent it because we don't want to sell it. It's the wrong time in the market. And boom, we're a landlord. And of course, everybody thinks they can do it. It's like paint. Do you guys have that? Like everybody thinks they can. Do you guys all think you can paint? Okay. So I thought I could paint. I've been fired from painting so many years ago. It's like everybody thinks they can paint and everybody thinks they can be a landlord. And everybody could probably paint and be a landlord. We just need a little bit of training, I think. I don't think you can train me to paint, actually. But I mean, these are the kinds of things. Dabbling in real estate, we talk about this oftentimes with people, like that's where you've got these great professionals here putting on this, where you've got professional real estate agents, professional mortgage broker. They're not doing this part-time. And that's what we find when we're a part-time landlord. What happens sometimes is it's not even intentional. We're just not necessarily doing everything right or to the best of our ability because we don't have as much time for it. We're doing it off the side of our desk. We're doing it when kids are busy and other things are happening. And that's kind of part of where I came in to want to help and support and educate differently, right? Is how do we all have to do this off the side of our desk? I mean, I did that for years. Too many jobs. My husband was waiting for me to finally leave and be full-time real estate investor. I'm trying to think how many properties we had by then. I loved my job. I worked in not-for-profit for years. I still love it, have a lot of philanthropic ideas, and we're right in the midst of actually creating a charitable foundation. So we've got lots of things we like to do, but I can't do all of them at the same time, right? It gets busy. So what I want you to do is we're going to get into some things about hiring your property manager here soon, and what I want you to think about is what kind of landlord are you now? If you're aspiring or looking at getting property, where are you at on that line? And just consider it. It's not in a positive or negative. There's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of having that idea, because when you go to hire somebody, you need to know who you are. I think when we hire people, we need to know about ourselves more than anything else, right? Cool. Any questions on these? Did anybody want to do any votes on who they are now, or nobody wants to share?
We could do a vote.
All right, let's see. So we could play on the side. Who's accidental or dabblers? Who in the room would admit to that? All right, thank you guys. I appreciate that. And then investors and strategic, who's feeling there? Yeah, cool. So we've got like a 50-50, and it moves. And I don't even know, like we could change some of this language, right? Like this is for fun. Because even if I'm a strategic investor with, however many years of experience, because I started when I was 5, I could still come back to my dabbler, let's call it something different, but I could be a newbie when I'm getting into something different. I haven't done full-blown developments yet. So, that's gonna put me onto the more novice side if we wanna play it that way. Okay, so we've had fun with this. So for the tenant archetypes, there's a lot of information on this slide. Basically, like I like to think about my delightful tenant, like I really like those. They're my 9s, right? So I don't give anybody a 10, so a 9 is like, that's ace here. So they're the ones that when you go by, they're baking you a pie. Have you guys had a pie baked? They're so fun. Maybe it's, I am aging myself now, right? Because my tenants are making me pies. And anyways, I'm doing something right? You're transitional. I mean, there's so many life stages that we go through, right? I've got stress today of being locked out of the vehicle. We think about what our tenants' stresses are each day. What's going on? Has somebody lost their job? What's changing? What's happening in their relationships? Like there is so much going on in life all the time. But again, so I got my delightful one, I've got my needy or negligent tenant. How are the tenants that they're fantastic, really friendly, and the place is a mess? So, so all of this is going to be around communication strategies, right? So that's what we're here today for. Challenging, how about those aggressive tenants? Who's had a nasty tenant? Okay, thank you. It's not fun. Not the most fun I've ever had. And I love doing this, but it's not the most fun when I'm getting yelled at or berated by somebody, especially when you're just trying to do a really great job for someone. Mostly it's why. It's they've got other things happening. There's so much going on. People are under so much stress. We've considered, mental health issues that people are struggling with right now. There's just so many struggles that we're going to get the gamut. I want you to think about how you're going to spot these people. So regardless of type of rental, so when you think about, okay, well, if you're doing short-term rentals, it's really hard because they're just going to book and come in, but there's still lots of checks that you're doing through that short term. As far as being able to it's so funny on just the difference on how someone can apply for something, that they've able to upload their ID properly can make a big difference to somebody where I'm seeing some issues, right? Somebody who can fill in an application, I can tell a big difference to the ones that can't even get through it. So just think about this. I will maybe after or check, I've got like some really cool stuff on running through in your ideal tenant profiles. This is really just, I wanted to give you an overarch. We're gonna see everybody, right? And how do you work better with certain tenants versus others? We've got to check ourselves, right? So the next one's all about communication strategies for these same. And to me, it's just the same tools over and over again in the fact of that we're being human, right? I want to be superhuman. I want to think about these things. I make mistakes. I can admit to my mistakes. When I try to slow down, take the time to be able to work out the problems. So thinking about, some different challenges or some different problems. So the most recent challenge, and it's not our first time, but this is probably maybe one of the more difficult ones that I've had in my career, is we do have a circumstance of a lease break due to domestic violence, and it's quite a violent one. And so it's very, very difficult in that aspect of we all know, because we know our legislation, that they can break the lease. The victim can break the lease for safety. But there's other factors, like just breaking a lease doesn't give her a new housing. And so, we have a violent situation, there's concerns, we've got to think about safety, what can we do to help? So as landlords, how can we help? How can we support ensuring that the safety of the premise is done, the locks are changed, we're communicating with everybody properly, we are being, I'll use the F word here, but we are being fair, and fair on all parts, because we're not a judge and jury. It's not for us to decide who is in the wrong or right here, and that happens a lot of the time. So it's one of the first slides was not to place judgment or discriminate. We can't choose these things. We have to be fair across the board. We have a legal contract, but we can make adjustments. So with this, I also have the experience where the person in the home is not able to afford it on their own. They can't afford to move just yet. They need some time. They can't afford it, so they need to get supports in place. So this is a very complex scenario because we're dealing with police and violence and highest stress, and we've got high emotions, financial issues, like probably the worst case scenario I would think for a landlord to be having to deal with. Is it our responsibility? Ultimately, yes, because it's still our property. It's still our property. We need to make sure that we're keeping that property safe. People are getting, things are being looked after. Rent is getting paid. So just going through those kinds of situations so for me, it was about communicating. I talked to both parties. I discussed the lease agreement with both parties on the process. I discussed what it was that we could do. How could we help? What could we do to reduce the lease period? What could we do to do payment plan? These are the things we can do. And ultimately, that's that. We're just there. We're not getting into it. I don't want to hear the stories. We're just going to say how we can help them get out of the lease if that's what's needing to happen. And people are again at their highest stress during that period. What other challenging? So, did anybody have a challenging story they want to share or get some help on? Yeah.
Yeah, I had to kick someone out last Friday for doing fentanyl in the house.
So how did that go?
The police came and kicked them out.
Okay.
That could kill 30 people, literally, what he had. I found it in his wallet because he suddenly lost his wallet. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. And I looked, what the hell is this? I had a feeling he was doing some stuff, right? I didn't do my screening properly. I literally have to make him do a drug test at this point. But, yeah.
And so are they in a separate fully of their own apartment or in a shared accommodation type situation?
Went to his girlfriend's place or something.
Okay.
I was trying to help him because he had his previous place, the roof collapsed or something, and AHS literally froze the entire building. So all of his stuff was in there and he couldn't get back in. So I was trying to help him. Okay, I understand your story, but I didn't know he was a freaking.
Right, and it's so hard because I think probably most of my stories that ever end in a terrible situation like that, and good for you, I'm glad you were on top of that right away and that you had police support, because sometimes it's difficult. Most of those started with something that I missed, right? We know our stuff, and for whatever reason, quite frankly, I'd say most of my stories that start like that, start with me doing someone a favor. And that doesn't mean I don't want to give people favors anymore, but what do we got to do to safeguard? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when I first started doing this, I think it was 2008 or 9, so we just finished renovating that 2-bedroom basement suite, spent thousands of dollars on it. and it had been empty for 3 months, and we got to the point where we need to get this rented, right? So I had a couple come in, this guy and his pregnant girlfriend, and he was saying, yeah, I love this place, we got the cash right now, and waving the cash.
Oh, yeah.
This. My spider senses were going off, right? But man, this place has been empty, and so I said, okay, well, we'll do a month to month, and so anyways, put them in there. Literally within a few months after late payments, and multiple fights between him and his pregnant girlfriend, holes in walls, the door was smashed. So finally, going through courts, got them out, and last day I went there, opened the door, he had a black and blue face, and I asked him what happened, and I guess her brother beat him up because they found him in the streets because he'd been beating up their sister, right? So I told myself, never again am I going to be a desperate landlord.
God, yeah.
So I learned my lesson from that.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that is the one that can catch all of us, no matter how skilled and experienced we can be sometimes, is that you got that vacant property, the cash in hand. That one, yeah, I know it for sure. As soon as somebody's, and the other one for me is if they look around and they love the place without really looking, like they run through it, and I'm like, did you even look at the place? And they're like, yeah, I want it. I'm like, yeah, no, there's something going on here, right? So it's always costs way more money to take the wrong tenant. Going through that process, I was curious that you had also mentioned that you started them with a month to month, because for me that would have been another flag. So I don't know how many here are doing month to month versus periodic leases, right? So what's the value, right? The difference. So obviously, short-term rentals are going to look very different. Those contracts are very different. I mean, even when we're looking at our Tenancies Act here under innkeepers, it's not the same act. But under our Tenancies Act in Alberta, don't forget the huge gift that we have, which is that fixed lease agreement as opposed to periodic, right? So as soon as we get in, if I'm going to give somebody a chance, and I'll say the truth, like no matter how many years I still have a heart, there's still sometimes the odd one. And I did a review, so it was right just kind of mid to the end of COVID. I did a full review on our group, of all of our tenants to see, how many issues do we have, how many I actually have a recording video. If anybody emails me, I'll send it to you. I did a whole review of like all the issues, payment plans, everything else, and essentially we were under 2% for actual problems. And that was even with giving a few people a chance. So with that, if you're going to do those things, being cautious, we definitely do what we'd call a short-term lease as opposed to a month-to-month, so that it at least is locked up, that we know, okay, maybe they're I won't get into my weighting criteria too much, but maybe they're a 5 or a 6. 5 is really tough. 6, really tough. Usually anybody I'm going to take is a 7 to a 9 in my criteria scale. I don't give anybody a 10. So if I'm considering a 6, there's got to be some good stuff in there, and maybe I would start with a 6-month term. I'm going to watch where that's going to bring me, because I don't want that to bring me into the middle of winter. So we are also going to watch where our vacancy dates are. Anyways, I could geek out on this stuff all day long, simply because I love it. And I mean, that's pretty much real estate and wine. That's about my only topics that I have. So after you're done talking to me about all that, I don't have much else to say. But yeah, so we've all had some challenges. What about great stories? Like I've had some super fantastic tenants. Like I've had tenants that have moved into a basement apartment, new couple, had their first baby, moved up into a townhouse, like moved all the way along. We actually helped them buy their first property. So I mean, the way I see it, like with the right people, I say this a lot, like you're kind of stuck with me. So you guys are in trouble now because you've all met me now. So that means you're kind of stuck with me, because then you've become part of my group. And so that's the way I look at it with my tenants, is that they're coming in and, maybe we're starting with a 1-year lease or all the rest of it, but that 1-year lease, it's crazy how fast that snowballs. And you're like, how did 12 years go by? And that's 12 years of somebody's life, renting in your property, contacting you when they need things, going through issues in their lives sometimes where something's going on. And I have like oodles and oodles of great stories. And I know we spend a lot of time on the bad ones because we learn from those. But I really want to remember about the great ones. So does anybody have a great tenant story yeah?
Well, one of my tenants helped me get a cool job, like the interview for the job. I kind of messed up the interview, that was my fault, but he got me in the door basically for Canadian Tire, the headquarters for accounting in Toronto, so that was kind of
That's awesome. And that's what we're talking about, right? It's about building relationship. It's not tenants and landlords. We're all people, right? Like I said from the beginning. Does anybody else have anything great they want to share?
I have a tenant that's constantly maintains a property. I never asked him to do it. Pays rents early on time. Yeah, no complaints. It's fantastic.
That's my delightful tenant, right? Those are my favorite. And those are the ones I'm thinking about. So I give everybody a gift. And it was hard this year. So like, again, we're only at 2% problem, but those 2% is really hard to give them a gift. But I still do it. And I've had great results from that because people are going through struggles, right? And getting a little gift makes a big difference. But those delightful tenants, it's so easy to give them a gift, right? So thinking about things that we can do to make their day. That was probably one of my first rentals. God, I was young. I moved out early, so I was like 17 years old, and I was so excited because this landlord came and he brought me homemade wine, which I was super stoked because I'm not even legal to drink, and it was really good wine. So like that gift, I'll never forget. Like that was too many years ago, and I'll never forget that, right? So it's things like that we can really make. When you look at pieces, I do a lot of training and right use of power work. When we think about who we are as a landlord, that we're holding so much control that when tenants are upset or things are happening, we have to remember that we're holding the cards, we're holding their housing, we're holding so much control. So there's a way to be empathetic with it, right? Anyways, okay, I talked too much. So who's here wanting to hire a property manager? Now, we know we've got a property manager in here. I do property support services, so we have different levels of what we can provide here. Who's thought about hiring a property manager, hired a property manager, had good, bad experiences? We're all ready to not do it ourselves, or we're all going to do it ourselves. What are we at? Yeah. Yeah. So and it's that piece, right? It's that conversation around what we need when we need some help. Like I talked about, having things off the side of your desk too much. We have busy lives. We can do it all ourselves, or can we? And are we doing it great ourselves? And we're just starting out. It's a good thing to just know about. I do believe. Well, I'm telling you guys all my secrets today. So I do believe that before you could hire somebody for anything, you do need to know how to do it, right? And you also need to know what your style is and what you want. So in order to be able to hire a great property manager, in my opinion, you have to be a great landlord. If you don't know anything about it, then that's oftentimes what will cause your property manager stress. I have a whole course I do just for property managers to help them pick you guys to see if you're going to be the right landlord for them, right? Because when you think we go on and on about the tenants, you see some landlords are real problems sometimes too, right? I know I can be. Okay, so the right property manager, again, this is when you guys are thinking about this and thinking about yourself, but I want you to think about what are the criteria that you really need. So I have a whole checklist. I'll offer this up. So make sure you have your phones. I'll have a QR code for you to get the checklist. So what's important to you? What's the criteria you're looking for? Experience, reputation. I mean, property managers get a bad rap. I think they almost get a worse rap than landlords sometimes because of their scope, right? They're dealing with so many more people, and most people only make a review when they're unhappy. So that's unfortunate. We try to get more and more happy reviews, and I know there's a lot out there that will give us some great reviews, but we really got to ask for those. Whereas when somebody's unhappy, we don't have to ask for it. We just get that. So how are you going to interview? So I've got a checklist for you guys on how you're going to interview your property manager. You can even use that to interview yourself. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to grow more doors, I want to do more stuff by myself, ask yourself those questions. Because I know for me, when I went through some of it, I was like, shoot, I'm not that good in this area. I got to brush up over here, right? We're not perfect. What are we scared of? So when we're thinking about hiring property, like I don't know about you guys, I was scared about looking at. I was so scared about looking at hiring property manager that I created a whole different company. So we'll get into that next. So how do we take away the fear of relinquishing control or providing that those services? How do we move away? For me, it's about talking about it, as you can tell. We're gonna just throw it all out on the table. I'm a direct person, so it's easy for me. But there's a lot of people where it's really, really hard to talk about, these circumstances, or we feel like we should know the answer, so we don't ask. And the contracts are complex and they're not written by us, and we don't understand them fully. So I would say really being sure, because you're the boss ultimately, right? And I think the scariest part is the level, again, of control as a landlord that we have. We really have to take care of safety. We're taking care of somebody's livelihood. We're taking care of a property. We have to be a good neighbor in the neighborhood. I mean, there's so many pieces as a landlord. Like, I think we should all get awards, right? So just, we'll do an award ceremony next. But like, really, we do a lot, and we do a lot of good, I think, in the community, and we just aren't shown that. So with that piece, we have a lot on our shoulders. So when we're going to let that go, it's risky, because you're thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to hand this over to somebody, what if they don't take care of things? What if they don't look after my property? Like, this is a really expensive house. I just renovated everything. Everything's brand new. I don't want to have leaks and problems and things not being looked after. So, I mean, isn't it really about building trust, right? So ultimately, every level is about building trust. At what level that you trust me now versus when you see me, in a year from now. So it's all around kind of how do we get to know people strongly to build that trust. And what here kind of speaks to anybody? Who wants to talk about one of the fears on here? Yeah.
It's probably like picking a tenant, the right tenant. Kind of like when realtors, they're like, I don't even trust them sometimes.
That's okay, yeah.
Pool. They get a bigger pool, better pool, but like even then, it's like I want to also do the verification kind of.
Right, so you want to stay in control of the verification of who's going to live in your house, right? And so I get that, absolutely. And then what I like to do too sometimes is, oftentimes we'll go into like, what are our ultimate goals? So if our goal is to have a couple of properties and you can manage it, and you take the time, you do your education, we've got lots of great courses to help support landlords, why not? Do it, be a great landlord. If you want to grow and have like 100 doors or 50 doors even, like I think I started to cap out, let's see, how long have I been capped out now? So I don't know, somewhere along the line, I felt like I had it all under control, but somewhere along the line, I needed to look at increasing my team. And that was probably around, the 50 to 100 mark in providing support services that I was like, okay, when I stopped remembering my tenants' names, or who lives in which property, or who's pregnant or who's not, and like, so once I stopped that, I knew I needed help, if that makes sense, because keep in mind I'm relational, right? So I really care about my tenants, but if I can't remember their name, then that's really not showing that I care about them very much, right? So it's looking at that tipping scale. So that's what I kind of wanted you guys to think about today, is what's that tipping scale for you on when do you need help, right? And then what are you scared of? And then how are you going to solve it? That's just that. And then we can fix all the world's problems. Okay, so here's that checklist I told you to watch for. So if anyone wants to grab that quickly, and certainly there's lots of other pieces like that, but it'll be just like it'll be good questions even for yourselves to go through to see, are you doing that, right? And our amazing property manager in the room, I'm sure already knows all this stuff too, but hopefully check in on that, and then I'm happy to help you pick great landlords. So the other pieces is courses. So I mentioned a bit, so it sounds like a lot of you guys are doing your own stuff in here, and I think that's awesome. That's like where I started with everything. My one kind of piece was doing everything myself for too long, that I got to a point where I actually think I stifled my growth, and I might have grown faster if I'd have started to collaborate sooner. But that's going to be a choice for all of you. So anyways, I've got the QR code if you're interested in any digital courses. So this is basically if you want to keep doing things yourself, but you need a little help, that's what I've built this out for. My husband actually arrived, so it sounds like we have a car, which is awesome, which means that I have my books here as well, so we'll put some of those out on the table. If people are wanting, I've got the Real Keys book here, it's $20. So we'll have that out on the table for anybody that wants it. But yeah, we're trying to find a way to make it easy. If you don't want to do everything yourself and you're not ready to go to full property management, so you still want to have control, but you don't want to do it all yourself, this is me. So this is essentially the business my husband and I created when we needed some more help. Back in the day, I used to run a small little landlady club as well, and it really was just a matter of us bringing together a group to help each other when we weren't ready to just relinquish it off. Some of it was cost related, right? It was like we really didn't have the room to pay for the full service. And some of it was definitely, I think, for the point that was made of like really wanting to still have control of who was living in the house. I'm very lucky that my husband is handy, so on the maintenance side, it was really important to us. So that's one of the big factors that we do is around the maintenance and repairs. So essentially, we've created a support service. I would call it a step maybe between to full property management. So I work with a lot of great property managers. So we go from self-managing, we can help you, we've got courses, we can coach you, to if you want some support services, we've got, you know, offers that we can do, to then obviously you grow and get to those 1,000 units. I can't help you either. You have to go to a full property manager at that point, right? So it's basically just wanting to give everybody the option so that you can be great landlords. Right? That's what we're here for. So that's what we do. This is me. So make sure and, you know, connect here. I would love to hear from people. I love comments. Like I said, my only topics are real estate and wine. So as long as you message me about either of those subjects, I will answer you. So let's get into some questions. Instead of me, I've been talking too long. Let's hear from you guys. Yes.
What do you charge for the a la carte services? Let's say move in, move out inspection, and showing tenants, for example. Only those 3 items, let's say.
So just okay, we're in fears. Oh, and what else was the other one? I'm making a huge mess today. Okay, here we go. So you're talking about lead generation and tenant placement, essentially, but not the ongoing.
Not even lead gen, just showing the units.
Okay. Yep. So some of our best piece is the lead gen for sure, because that's, I think Lane mentioned earlier, on our software. So we've actually done a lot of work in getting through all those weeds to get the best people coming. So if you're looking for someone to literally open the door because you can't be there. So we've had many people over the years where they're out of town, they're on holiday. We even had like a little membership group at one point where we were supporting each other for those kinds of things. So that is a very specialized. So I'll just ask you to connect with me afterwards on that, because it really depends on a couple of factors. Is interesting because it's about building trust, right? So, and it's trust on our side too, because if you're doing the screening and having us go to open the door and you're not doing a good job at screening, we could have to go 100 times. Whereas if we did the screening really well, we might only have to go 3 times. So it's really about looking at, oftentimes we do that on an hourly service. Same with the move out. If you just want us, I have one client for years. I think he's in Vancouver, but I'm not sure now. He does all of it. He even has a neighbor support to have somebody go in for to give access to the property, and he just hires us for the move in and out. So on the move in and outs right now, I'm doing them at $150 a pop. I think that's a great deal. Of course, I can say that, but because I actually have maintenance teams. So we have real maintenance looking at and doing those things. We can also do some of the repairs in between if need be. Yeah, what other questions can I answer?
A quick question here.
Yes.
So do you have a system to run a background check?
Yes, I have an old-fashioned system. I do it. And so we've used all of what did Neighborly switch to? Single key. So we've used these, and so in my experience, that's kind of where I'm back to the old-fashioned way where I want to see it myself. So we do the social media scans, we're running a credit check, we're calling the employers, we're calling the landlords ourselves. I've had lots of fake landlords over in my time. I shouldn't say lots, right? But we've had fake landlords, so I know the ways to trick a fake landlord out. We've pulled title on properties to see who actually really owns the property. Usually I already knew it was a fake landlord, but I just really wanted the proof, so I pulled the title. Yeah, so we've got a few little pieces like that, but I would say that's the one thing I have. Of all the things I've systematized, we use a lot of automation. We're working on an AI bot right now. We've got lots of cool stuff to help get that 500 or how many people so we can find that great tenant that we're gonna have a huge long relationship with, right? I use lots of automation for that, but for the actual background check, I do it old-fashioned. Yeah.
So for your documentation, like your rents application form, your walkthrough forms, your actual lease documents, do you create that yourself, or do you use like a standard lease from like some website?
Yeah, well, so not from some websites, so I want to be cautious between, and I don't want to get in trouble because I know I'm being recorded, so I'm not kind of throwing anybody out, but some of these different rental listing places that include that include a lease, those leases aren't very strong. So I trust the Calgary Residential Rental Association. I'm not smarter than their lawyers. They've been fantastic. So we use a base of their lease agreement. We've been members with them for years. We've actually been at their celebrations, got a couple of awards with them as well. So we use that and we add an addendum for maybe specifics for the house or some extra things. The rest of the documents we've spent lots of time creating. So I'm YYC pet friendly. So we have a pet friendly addendum. I think it's a 14-point addendum. Generally what I say as a pet lover is I myself would hate to sign it because it is pretty much ironclad. But at the same point, what I say to responsible pet owners is they should have no problem signing it because of course they would never do any of those things on the list, right? Because they love their pets. It's what protects us from having bad pet owners. I would say our lease protects us from getting bad tenants. I one time, and now I'll never do this again, so we were going through the lease and she was lovely. He was just a little bit rough around the edges, I'll say. And during the lease process, he was complaining about every little piece and like pushing back on like, as if we weren't allowed to do this and within this rule. And I think you guys know this kind of person sometimes. Yeah, but we were all the way there at this point and I was like, he's just, whatever, he's just pushing the envelope on everything. But what does that mean when he becomes my tenant is he pushes the envelope on everything all the time, right? So I have now walked away and literally ripped up a lease when that's like, to me, it is not done until actual keys are released because somebody's attitude can change, right? But yeah, documentation, we use pretty set forms. So if people are used to using their own leases and they decide they want to kind of work with us, that's always been a tough one because what I say, as soon as I start making adjustments, I start making mistakes. So we really do have a standardized kind of process that we trust, that we use for our properties. If there is a specific addendum or something that needs to be adjusted for your property, we can always look at that, but we've got to be careful because there's always a risk that your lease doesn't go out and ours does instead or something like that, right? So we want to be really careful. So we just use separate addendums for that. Yeah.
Do you know if there's a software in Canada now, like in the States, where you can look up if they're a bad tenant, like they're not paying rent and stuff? There's a database for them. We don't have that.
We don't really have that. We all keep our own. So there's some Facebook groups. I've got my own blacklist. But yeah, the communities like this, let's share information, but being careful not to discriminate as well. So we have to be cautious around that, right? And that's why Canada doesn't have that kind of thing, is we have to be really, really careful around people's privacy. Yes?
I was wondering if you could talk about the legalization of basement suites and how you look at that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know I've got some pros in the room on this already too, and Phil's arrived. So, the legalization of basement suites, what I think is super cool, we've been, again, I've already aged myself, so you guys know that I've been around for a bit. So we've been kind of in the process since the beginning, not the beginning, I'm not that old, but like at one point they were making they didn't have a proper legalization process, right? So at one point they were making you move the electrical panel, I don't know if anybody remembers this, to a common space so that both tenants had access to the electrical panel. So a lot of people spent a lot of money doing that, and then it turned out that actually never ended up having to be a thing that they needed to do. So we sat on a lot of committees for a lot of years to finally get what we believe is a gift from the city, which is the amnesty. And so we have, not quite 2 years left of this gift. And essentially what that allows is that any unit that predates 2018, so the unit existed pre-March of 2018, means that we don't have to have dual heat source, which is a big piece, especially if your ceiling's all fully drywalled. Maybe if your ceiling's open like this, you don't mind putting in a secondary heat source, but most of the time things are closed up already. So that gift essentially allows us to legalize units anywhere from $5,000 to maybe $20,000 I've seen as a high end if it needs a whole basement ceiling drywalled. We now have the incentive piece. Now, that incentive piece, it was really good when it first came out of the gate. Now they've made some slight adjustments so that $10,000, it really eats up a big chunk to what would be building code suite. So we're looking at amnesty suite and building code suite, right? So it's used for both. So there's 4,000 or something in that. That's for the secondary heat source. So us on the amnesty side, the max we can get is 6,000. That being said, I mean, I just, when we were running, we had tons and tons of illegal units. That's what we all had. I'm admitting it. All of our units are legal now, so anybody watching this can know that we're all good. And we helped hundreds of other people legalize. I just like the idea of safety. So for me, rather you agree with what the city says or not, or what building code should or shouldn't be, you know what, they're not asking me. And at the end of the day, as long as we can be safe, and I think that's what the city's given us right now, is a really cool opportunity to make those basement suites safe. I said I was an expert in forest lawn. I'm maybe an expert in legalization of suites as well, if that's a thing. I can usually quote your basement suite, tell you what's wrong without ever going to it. We've done so many of them. They've made it pretty simple. Inspectors are still inspectors. Are there any city inspectors in the room? Make sure I'm not getting myself in trouble, but I mean, and they're there for the same reasons. They're there to help us keep the property safe, but sometimes they ask us for silly stuff, like that aren't on the list at all. Like I've had that, they always ask me for railings, so just know that there's nothing on your list anywhere that says about railings, but that is a basic minimum safety, right? So you have to have things to minimum safety and then do what's needed for the legalization. But a peephole, I didn't know a peephole was minimum safety. We're gonna have a big discussion about that, but I literally had to put in a peephole at one of the properties once. And you know what, you don't argue with them, you just do it. So I don't know if that answered, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of years, Phil. You've been drywalled a lot of furnace rooms, a lot of awkward spaces, and it was real fun when we had sprinklers. Like we've been around to the cowboy days, and now we're, it is what it is today.
From like consultation all the way to getting it all done, and
so we take it over. So essentially, I'm here, I can support somebody who's partway through and wants a hand, but generally the easiest thing for me is to start it fresh. And we apply for everything, including the incentive. We do all the inspections, we arrange, like literally, that's just been the easiest way. We usually run a bunch at once. So we're usually kind of in with the city, I'll be doing a certain quadrant at a time, and we'll have 15 running through, and so it's just easy to group them all together, get the drywall out, guy done, get the electricity done, get the permits all done. I do all the city stuff. Not the most fun I've ever had, but you know what, you get it done. And sometimes we get through with 2 inspections, and sometimes we have to do 8. So it just depends on our inspectors. Yeah, thank you for asking that.
Basically a general contractor.
I'll let my husband be that. I just talk on the phone. So the only thing I know how to do is talk, I think. I'm a good communicator. I don't know if you guys agree, but like generally I do. I talk to the tenants, I talk to the landlords, I talk to the city, I talk to my husband. He stopped listening a long time ago. We've been married 18 years. So yeah, but yes, I would say on the maintenance repairs, I think that's probably our big value. Like when you say, okay, what's the difference between us and property management? I think a lot. We are not here to compete with property managers. Like I said, I work with tons of great property managers. We love referring to property managers. We're here to be a solution for a self-managing landlord that needs some help. And then a lot of our support, to be honest, is around the maintenance, because most of your problems once you have a tenant are going to be about maintenance. So we have in-house maintenance, and I think that's probably our big differentiator, is we actually understand what's going on when we're getting the call. Well, my husband understands what's going on when we get a call about a leak. We have a good maintenance team. We have a huge subcontract team of trusted individuals, electricians, plumbers, HVAC that we've used for 20 years on all of our properties, right? So basically what we did is we built in what was working for us and just created some form of what we felt to be was a reasonable package to share with others. And then that way we get better discounts because we're coming in with a larger amount of properties. Yes, yeah.
I wanted to go back to the pets with properties. I know some realtors, investment property owners, they don't like having pets at all. But you can also have a certain pet deposit. I'm curious, for your pets deposits, how much is it? And do you ever have like a non-refundable pet deposit?
It has to be a fee. So you're going to change your word from deposit to fee immediately, because we can't, so remember we're following all the rules, we can't take more than the 1 month's rent as a security deposit. So we can't take any more deposits regardless. So it's pet fees. The other thing I like to comment is that I find, to be honest, a lot of investors don't really want any tenants. Like, they don't want pets, they don't want families, they don't want kids, they don't want people, they don't want somebody to cook, right? Like, we just want somebody to pay the rent, right? So ultimately, how are we gonna, it's around mitigating risk. So people say, okay, well, pets is a risk, so I'm just gonna say no to it. And, I'm like, well, like some of my greatest tenants have been pet owners, like fantastic tenants. And so I'm thinking, if I'm narrowing my pool by saying no pets and I don't even get to meet this great person. So then if we want to talk about pet fees and pet addendums and all of that, it's somewhat irrelevant when you're thinking of, it's really just another screening tool, right? A great pet owner is going to come to me with vet records, and they're going to want me to call their doggy daycare and their trainer. They're going to be so excited, right? So like, I'm going to get extra references to know that this person is a real responsible person. As far as adding an extra fee, I use it as a marketing tool. So essentially, depending on what market we're in, if I've got a fantastic tenant and it's already at the top of their budget, for the difference of an extra $50 a month, am I going to lose the tenant? So really, it's more around, I can make the rents look a little bit smaller, and then I can pop the pet fee back up to get it back up to where I need to be. I'll use the F word one more time, but it's just to try to be as fair as possible. So yes, our average fee is a $50 monthly pet fee added to the rent. I've waived it, I've increased it, I've reduced it. And I know I had a question over here too, so we'll go, yes.
I just wanted to ask if you had any recommendations when it comes to like tenant management software for keeping track of expenses in different units.
I think there's a great guy here, Alex, that you might want to chat to, so maybe you guys can connect because he's got a great software. For us, we're focusing more on the automation side, so we're a lead generation. That's where all the front side, as opposed to, I use the same software for my management as well, but it might not have some of the bells and whistles that Alex's does. So we can even talk offline about a couple of those things. Yeah, super. Did that answer? Or yeah, go ahead.
I have another question.
Yes.
Do you have any experience when it comes to like master key systems for maybe a huge?
Yeah. So okay, great question. So one time, I mentioned I was in this little landlady club. So one of our gals, super great gal, she was a teacher for years. So she's a retired teacher. She'd managed to get 30 doors, and we were going to provide her some support. And she met us and gave us a briefcase of keys.
Lipstick, little twist tie.
It was terrible. It was terrible. Like, you'd be at the property and it was terrible. Then we've also had all the way full to the like super duper crazy locksmith master keyed lock that you've got to get a locksmith to come in to change it and stand on your head, and it's very expensive. And of course, everybody has to have it written into their lease agreement that if they lose a key or something happens, it's going to cost them $150 and their firstborn. So, so you've got like one extreme to the next, right? We use Wiser Smart Locks. So we go in the middle. We're using a standard Wiser Smart Lock. We can rekey them. We use lock boxes on all the properties so that the keys are actually on the property, so that whomever it is that needs to get in can access the keys from there. We've looked at starting to automate more, using coded locks as well. So keypad locks are great, except when tenants don't change the batteries, which happens all the time. We've been looking at more stuff on the smart technology, which is super fun. But when you're not the one in control of the Wi-Fi and you're at a property, you can't even turn on the lights. It's also annoying. So it's, trying to figure out the balance between what can you do it's like your juice for your squeeze. What's your best bang for your buck? That's the one we chose. It doesn't mean it's right for you. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a locksmith who provided two keys, one for the tenant and then a master key.
Yep.
So that this master key can open all your properties. So never lose that master key.
Yep.
But and then each tenant has their own separate key. So that way you can still change a tenant key, but that master key always unlocks all the locks.
How do you change a tenant key? Because what we found in the master lock system, because we have that in our multifamily, is every time we have a problem that we don't call the locksmith on, and we change a lock, it's no longer on the master key. So we need the locksmith to fix it. Oh, Natasha's got an answer maybe.
Rekey, you can program that new lock, depending on which one it is. Even Home Depot people don't even know this sometimes. If I had to buy a new lock for that door, I said, hey, I need to rekey this to my master key before installing it. And then I get 2 more.
And it goes to both. Okay.
So when you bought the lock,
Say again?
when you
Fun.
bought the lock, they coded it to your master key.
Sorry?
When you
Yeah.
bought the lock, they coded it to your master key. Like you went in with the key and bought the lock.
So if I went to Home Depot to buy a new door lock because it broke or something, before leaving Home Depot, I tell them, can you rekey this to my master key, reprogram the door lock before I install it.
And then you get the tenant key created to be
Well, they
different.
actually don't even need new tenant keys because I've already made my master key, which is the same thing as their keys. I've already rekeyed the new door lock, and when I install it, no new keys are needed.
Okay, we might go down a small bunny hill here because I'm like, even me, I'm like, okay, I'm not sure completely because what we've had happen is that our master key ends up working on 80% of the units and not the last few because of some changes that have been made, but we thought we needed a locksmith to recode that master key to it.
My
Yeah.
situation was a locksmith, but you had 2 keys that can open this lock. One's
Yes.
the master, one's the tenant.
Yes. And we've had that system. And again, that's the system I struggle with when we've had to make a change. We don't want to always call a locksmith. Yeah, and it's not always convenient. Like how many month ends happen on the weekend? How does that work? Like how do they do it? I just can't figure it out. But it's all, and they're always long weekends. I didn't even think we had that many long weekends. And then you're trying to call a locksmith. So that's been our issue, is that when the problems occur, it's not convenient. But
So
yeah.
we moved to keypad locks.
Yeah, which is great so long as the locks are, so long as the batteries are kept up.
And it doesn't freeze.
And it doesn't freeze. So you're always going to have something. You're never going to be perfect, but close, right? So yeah, cool. Yeah.
I have a question regarding maintenance and repair. Once we notify the repair, what's the timeline for you to get somebody to the door?
Yeah. We like to do everything between 24 to 72 hours. And I say like, because it also depends. So I mentioned earlier about my tenant that doesn't like me anymore because we didn't go back to rehang his hooks that were hung on the wall that we didn't consider to be maintenance. So what's the issue? So is it a minor issue? And what we try to do is group those minor issues. Like if you think that it's $150 to get us to get on the property, right? Just to go out. You don't want us to go for those types of minor issues. We're going to group all those minor issues together, and we'll do that usually around inspections. So we want to be on the property minimum 3 times a year, right? So we're going to do a spring and fall inspection. I'm going to do an informal. So I'm going to do a holiday. We're actually probably there more like 4 times a year. And then with that, we're going to group all those little things. But if it's an appliance, appliances are key. I want to get that looked after ASAP, but sometimes it takes 72 hours depending, especially if we're going to replace it. If it's a leak, we want somebody in there within 24 hours. We don't want to start seeing major damage. I'm usually like the whole deal. Like, what level of leak is this? Okay, well, listen, water shut off to the house. Nobody's allowed to use the toilet. Like, what type of leak is it? So we want to, and that's maybe what Lane was speaking to around the communication piece. We're not just sending somebody. We're actually talking to the tenants about what they need to do to help ensure that there's no further damages occurring until we can get somebody there. But I do often say, like, nothing good happens at 2 a.m. So I do tell everybody, go back to bed. Like, if there's a leak, turn the water off, go back to bed. Like, it doesn't matter to me what 24-hour plumber out there, they're, in my opinion, they're not going to be doing a good job at that time. They're probably not even going to come. They're going to answer the phone to make you feel better, and then they're still not going to get out there until 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2 days from now, right? So we want to mitigate the issue as quickly as possible, and then, yeah, ideally, now if we're talking about a big renovation project, you want a new deck or fence or whatever, I mean, that's going to be scheduled. Cool.
Laura, so are you guys also offering property management services, or is it?
Property support services. So I'm very, very clear on the difference. So we spent a lot of time making sure, working with great property managers like yourself. We've been reviewed by RECA numerous times on what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So basically, we want to come in as a support service in the middle. So I think we're actually a great service to property managers as well. because we can help train your landlords. If you've got a landlord who's maybe not quite ready for your services, but you'd still like to see them get some help, that's us. So we don't touch any money. And that's the key. So when you're getting big enough, you can't manage that. You need a property manager who's going to have, we don't want any of the fiduciary responsibilities. So we're not dealing with any of the financial side of it. When you're ready for that, you want a good property manager that's going to make sure all that's looked after. Yeah.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
In terms of evictions, right?
Yes.
Non-rent payments, right? We've dealt a few last year, and it was a very lengthy process, right? We came out winning on all of them, right? But do you guys offer any services where we could kind of delegate you guys to kind of take over and handle?
Interesting. I've had that question a few times, and what's really fun about that question is, I'm going to frame this right. We can support, and that could be a great conversation for us to have, but what we want to be cautious of is we don't want to just we've talked about reputation, all these fun things. I don't want to just get thrown in and being pegged as the eviction girl, right? So we don't just want all your problems. We really want the fun stuff too sometimes. So we want the good tenants as well. So yes, I can support. It's something that we can look at, and we certainly have done that. And I think we actually have a great track record as well, and usually really quickly. But what I really want to do instead is what we talked about for the first half of this whole conversation was around communication, is I'd rather mitigate the issues and not end up at court. So there's lots of other, Serve It and other bailiff and programs that do strictly evictions. We want to be more around communication support, if that makes sense. We want to build longer term relationships.
So you can help us with the lead gen side as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I actually, and I've got a great product, so that might be something that we can talk about for sure. Yeah, great. All right, well, I've been talking everybody's ears off, so thank you for having me. I'll bounce back one, because I think there was here also, you're more than welcome to book a consult if anybody wants. You can go on, it'll give you a free 20-minute if anybody wants to hear me talk more. You might have had enough. And then, yeah, I'll leave some books out at the back, and I'll be hanging around. Great. Thank you.